right, it's the Pop Tower Podcast. I am Peter W. Dawson.
I'm James Bullock.
And today, everything's coming up Millhouse.
Yes,
Isn't that right, James?
Yes, it is.
Because today we're going to be talking about television and movies. Mm-hmm. What, no video games?
No, not today.
Well, sort of. Because it happens, the television and video games or movie we're going to be talking about are both video game related.
Mm-hmm.
So, why don't we talk about this, huh? Sound like a good idea?
It sounds like a good idea that I never saw coming.
All right, excellent. Let's continue now. Because you'll never see it coming.
Oh, that is the greatest battle theme, I swear. To this day, I do not care what anyone says. That's my favorite video game battle theme in history.
So to explain what we're referencing, just over a week ago now, at the time this episode will go out anyway, ideally, the Persona 5 animation, Persona 5 the animation to be exact, just started airing. It's available on Crunchyroll and Hulu if you happen to be American. I do not. We had this conversation before.
Yeah, that was the thing.
It's like, I don't actually have Hulu, but it's fine.
Yeah, it's so sad because, like, Peter doesn't have GameFly availability, he doesn't have Hulu availability. Yeah. And there's so many good things he could have right now, but because of his living and the fact that they decide they want to limit Canadians, they hate Canadians for some reason. I don't understand why. Because they're. I also can't get Verve. I think it's called. Oh man.
Which is the compilation service. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so to quickly go over Persona 5 very briefly, Persona 5 is
before we say it, your 2017 Game of the Year.
Yes.
And my 2017 runner-up Game of the Year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can totally see the argument for why the your winner was the winner, and likewise my runner-up probably should have been the winner, etc. As it were, because we have very similar tastes. Who knows?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So Persona 5 was a 2016/2017, it came out in Japan. I think at the end of 2016, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly. Yep.
September in 2016, and then it came out in North America in April of 2017.
That's right.
And so the animation, which has now started about a year after the game came out, to be exact.
Yeah, that was the thing that was surprising when I announced, like, oh yeah, this is coming out right, pretty much in line with the North American anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
Which is pretty nice.
Yeah, and it's it's essentially an animated adaptation of the game. It's going to cover most of the major events, probably do some serious compression, because we have seen this before with the Persona series, because Persona 4, which came out in 2008, actually, there was an animation in 2011 that was an adaptation, and it's going to be interesting to see how 5 ultimately compares to 4, because 4, I think, is one of the better video game anime adaptations.
Yeah.
But it's still got some problems.
And it's still got a lot of stuff they had to cut out.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, they were really clever with some of the stuff how they included it.
Exactly.
Because there's a huge stretch of that game where basically nothing happens except you advance social interactions, and they had a very interesting way of addressing it by basically making it a 2-part episode where you see the main character do something mysterious over summer vacation, and then the second episode reveals what he was doing. So it's almost kind of Rashomon in that respect, which I always love a good Rashomon reference.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so for Persona 5 the animation, it follows, I was actually surprised with the name they went with, Ren Amamiya?
Yeah, well that was the name that they had been throwing around a lot on the message boards after the game came out.
Well, because one of the original names I heard was Akira.
Yeah, that was the argument. It was either between Ren or Akira, and everybody was saying, a lot of people were funny that they actually wanted to go with Ren over Akira.
Yeah, I'm really curious about that.
And that's what they went with.
But for whatever reason, they went with Ren.
Yeah, they went with Ren.
So he is a troubled student who has recently been forced to move to Tokyo. Like, this previous Persona games had taken place in kind of small fictional towns. Yeah, in this case, no, it's just like kind of a both real and fictional part of Tokyo.
Exactly.
Yeah, like, there's a lot, like, they go to Shinjuku and stuff, but they also go to fictional places. And yeah, in this case, he's forced to live with, shoot, now I'm blanking on his name. Sakura.
Oh, yeah.
Why can't I think of his name?
Yeah.
Something Sakura.
You're talking about
Sojiro.
Sojiro. Yeah. I mean, you had the last name right. I think you were going to go with it.
I didn't want to, because, like, they always call him Sojiro. Yeah, and so he's forced to go live with Sojiro Sakura, who runs the Cafe LeBlanc, and it's like this little cafe where it's not clear how he makes money.
Yeah, that was always the running gag throughout the entire video game, was the fact that he has like a couple of real standard hardcore customers. It's like Bob's Burgers, really. It's like the Japanese version of Bob's Burgers. He's got a couple of hardcore everyday visitors, and then that's really it. So yeah, poor soldier though.
I know it's, but yeah. So for reasons that aren't entirely clear, he decided to accept, like, his one of his regulars is friends with Ren's parents.
Yeah,
told him about the situation, and he decided to take him on as kind of a ward because Ren, as it turns out, got charged and sentenced for assault.
Yes, against an unknown individual at this time.
Yeah, like, as the game goes on, and of course you learn more about the situation, but we don't want to give too much away.
Right, because of course the anime is going to cover this as well.
Yeah. But what's crazy is, so we see Ren go to Shujin Academy, his new school, where we meet the principal, who always looks like, what if you wanted to do a caricature of the Kingpin from Marvel? Yeah. It's like we want him to be very round, but we don't want him to look physically imposing, so he's going to be a butterball. The poor man. But they always have at least one character who's usually kind of an antagonist. He always just looks horribly caricatured.
Yeah, he looks just out of place completely compared to everybody else in the show, in the series. It just looks
really does.
Absolutely unreal.
Yeah. And, so he goes there, and one of the things I noticed right away is this one makes a lot more references to Persona 4 than the actual game did.
Yeah.
There was like 3 or 4 really early on.
Yeah, it really was.
And it just, and of course, since they don't have time to be subtle, because they can't expect replays of the game, because it's not a game in this case, and they have to get to the point where the protagonist is shown powered up, because of course there's, supernatural elements and everything like that. Mm-hmm. They got to get to that point by the end of the first episode, because anime studios hate it when, like, the big thing about the show isn't revealed in the first episode.
Right.
There's actually a history with this, because I think it was Victory Gundam in particular. They didn't want to show the Victory Gundam itself until like the 3rd or 4th episode, but they were forced to put it in the first one.
Mm.
So you can see, despite the fact that, anime has certain rules, things they can get around compared to live action, they still have certain things they have to be beholden to. That's very, marketing. Yeah, it's like, you have to do an episode of Dragon Ball Super. You have to have Goku turn Super Saiyan in the first episode.
Right, at the end of the episode to get you hyped for the next one.
No matter whether it makes sense or not.
Right.
In this case, yeah, so they had to... Because it's almost an hour and a half until he powers up in the game, I think.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty lengthy because we start getting used to the social links and you get introduced to Ryuji and just kind of like getting used to being in school for a little bit. So, about 2.5 hours before you even get to the point where you start actually learning the battle system. Like, really learning it. Because we had a little short tutorial at the beginning, which, of course, they skip in the anime because we're not worried about any of that.
Yeah, you really didn't need to do that at all, yeah.
Yeah.
And they made his escape and the interception a lot less dramatic.
Yeah, that was actually shocking because I was kind of hoping they would recreate the ladder scaling moment. That was absolutely hilarious to me. Like, I love how badly he tried to climb the ladder. So,
look, not everyone's good at climbing ladders, okay? But ultimately, what happens is, just because we didn't really touch on this, the show does start with a flash forward, and all the events are essentially being retold to a prosecutor who has arrested Ren in November, and the show starts in April.
Right.
When he first moves to Tokyo from whatever the hell he's
wherever
from.
he was from, yeah.
Doesn't matter to this show, yeah. Just rolls off the tongue,
doesn't it? It really does.
And, yeah, because they didn't have time to be subtle, they had to make some stuff that happens a little more obvious, which I did kind of appreciate. Like, we got foreshadowing to what happens with the teacher.
Yeah, we do. And the introduction of Goro, like, they who is a major character later in the game. I mean, he comes in about maybe a third of the way into the game where you're introduced to him, but, like, the last third of the game, he's huge and a big deal. Don't want to spoil exactly why, but you'll pretty much figure it out. But I love the fact that one thing they didn't show in the game, which they couldn't show very early on, when the girls are like fawning over Goro's, like a video, they're just watching a video on the phone, and they see Ren just like awkwardly staring at them, and they get kind of freaked out about it.
Yeah, there's some interesting touches they've added. Like I said, especially with the more Persona 4 references, they foreshadow more stuff, and they make clearer early on what certain stuff's going on. Like, I'm actually curious if they're going to look into, because one of the things that's weird is in the first episode and early on in the game, when the protagonist seemingly first encounters something supernatural with his phone, time seems to stop.
Yeah, it did in the anime too.
Yeah, like they did that in the anime too, but like, we never really got an explanation for what. Like, we got an idea of what it was.
Right, and the same thing happens when he powers up the first time when time stops.
Yeah, or seemingly does. Yeah.
Oh yeah, apparently. It might be one of those things like in his mind time stops because it's something he's focused on so much. But in reality, everything's still moving. But I don't know. Like I said, never really explained it. Maybe they might do it here.
Yeah, because they didn't. Yeah, because they didn't in the game. Because it's not just like, oh, whenever they activate the phone app supernatural thing, and it's not like time stops because they're established to be missing when they go into the other world.
Yeah.
So it's not that. So yeah, I'm really curious to see what other stuff they'll maybe try to explain that the game necessarily didn't do a good job of. Like, either way, I'm fairly happy with the adaptation. But you can tell, especially in the first episode, that it's rushed.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem right now that I'm having is the fact that I experienced the game in full twice, really, just to get those trophies. Yep. But and I'm wondering, it's like I'm intrigued to see how much they change, especially when it comes to like the confidants and their interactions or lack thereof, like what confidants might show up and which ones won't. Mm-hmm. I'm intrigued to see the cuts and what they edit out, what they feel is important and what isn't. But having experienced the game itself and knowing that pretty much this is just, like you said, a rush adaptation of it and a minimized version of what we've experienced already, I don't know if I'm that excited about it.
Yeah. At least it's got pretty animation.
Oh, yeah, it looks great. The funny thing about the animation on the game when they did the cutscenes, when they do the anime cutscenes, look absolutely fantastic. And this looks even better.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing, too, because, like, Persona 4, one of the problems they had with the anime is the protagonist, they couldn't decide if he was going to be mute or not.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some episodes where he basically never talks, and there's other ones where he talks a lot.
Right.
And it's kind of jarring. In this case, they seem to be, he's nervous and doesn't talk much, but he's more naturally speaking.
Right.
Which is true.
He's a shy guy. He comes across as a shy individual.
Yeah, he's shy, but he's still communicative. Like, he speaks more, like, it's not just like, in Persona 4, like, someone would ask him something and he'd just shrug.
Right.
You know, it'd be more of a mime.
And then the next time you would see him, he's just, like, having a whole monologue to himself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, in this case, he speaks. He doesn't really have monologues. I mean, there's a lot of points where he just kind of stares, but he's just a man of few words, but he's not as mute as he was, like, which is
And I think that will change as the story progresses, too, because I think they're just trying to give you room for the other characters. Just like it was in the game, because late in the game is when you start really having him talk a lot more. I think the other thing that's going to happen in the anime, I think he'll have an opportunity to talk a lot more when the story progresses a little bit further.
Yeah, meanwhile in Persona 4, even though they got freaking Johnny Young Kaibosh.
Yeah.
Sorry, I shouldn't call him Kaibosh. That might be badly interpreted. Johnny Young Botch, one of my favorite voice actors, because he's also a former Power Ranger. Mm-hmm. They got him to voice the protagonist of Persona 4, and then he barely ever talks. Yeah. And it's like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah, but one thing I got to before we close out, I have to ask you, your thoughts on Kamoshida's slapping techniques. Because I lost it when he jumped into the air like he was on a spike of volleyball and slapped the piss out of Ryuji.
I thought that was really clever because we haven't seen Kamoshida much yet.
Right.
Because, like, that's one of the disadvantages because they had to rush through it is because we were introduced to the first antagonist, Kamoshida.
Right.
But we only see him in one scene where we kind of know what his deal is, but we haven't touched on it much yet. And now you get just, like, more interesting stuff going on with him because of his physicality, because he's a gym teacher. So he's like, oh, he's going to do a volleyball spike slap. I honestly thought that was clever.
That was hilarious to me. When I saw it, I lost it. That was
it also takes the sting out of an adult abusing a child.
Abusing a teenager. and threatened to kill him.
17, but still.
Yeah. No, but good stuff. I think I think people that play the game will probably enjoy it just to see how it turns out, but I don't think it's must see right now.
No, it's probably gonna. If it's anything like the last one, it should probably be fine.
Right.
But we'll see what happens because I still enjoyed it and I'll probably still watch
it.
it.
I'll definitely keep tabs on it. Definitely.
Oh yeah, absolutely. See what else happens with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get some anime slots free since a bunch of shows I liked ended.
Yeah.
But moving on, speaking of video games. So, there's a little movie, directed by one Steven Spielberg.
Whoever that guy is.
That kid's going places.
Whoever that guy is.
Yeah, no, I'm sure he's not that important. Yeah, so Steven Spielberg's adaptation of the Ernest Cline novel Ready Player One, which, as of this recording, has surpassed 400 million worldwide.
Wow.
So it's doing all right, which, considering when it popped in and everything, and it kind of underperformed domestically, not by much, but I think they were hoping for at least 60 mil, and they only got about 45 mil. But it still made over 400 million worldwide, so I wouldn't call it an unsuccessful film. And so for those who aren't familiar, Ready Player One was a 2011 novel by Ernest Cline, and it is essentially a pop culture celebration because it follows our protagonist Wade as he goes through the Oasis, a futuristic virtual reality program, which essentially has replaced the internet.
Yeah,
because it's one of the most important things in the world, and it's part video game, part just VR experience. But it's one of the most addictive, intrinsic, experiences where you can truly be anyone, you can truly do anything.
Just the trance.
Yeah, yeah, like the trance from Techno Babylon.
Yeah, they're doing a callback.
So we did talk about that game a few episodes back, and so as a result, you get to see society just devolving and progress in a lot of ways kind of cease. Like you see Columbus, they've just started stacking trailers.
Yeah, before we go any further, we had to note that it's Columbus, Ohio, that the real world reality is set in where Wade lives in, and it's a junk pile. It's a living junk pile.
Yep. And so as a result, Wade, what's his name? Parzival?
Yeah. His avatar name. That's his avatar name in Oasis.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. His character Parzival is participating in a hunt for the great Easter egg created by why am I forgetting his name now? Oh man, I am terrible today.
Holiday.
Yeah, Holiday. Yeah, wow. I really blanked on everyone's name. That was bad.
I had to look to find out what his first name was because I wanted to make sure it's James Holiday. I can't believe I forgot his first name. The irony is not lost on me. But I just I knew it was Holiday because they said it so many times. So.
Yeah, James Holiday, the creator of the Oasis, and kind of a pop culture guru, kind of loosely based on Steve Wozniak.
Yeah, definitely. You can definitely see the influence.
Yeah, that's probably the best. And he as a result, also known as Anorak, just because we're mentioning usernames.
Yeah, that's his avatar too. That's his avatar in the game too.
He created a challenge within the world where if you collect 3 keys, you can unlock the Easter egg, which will give you the potential to own essentially the Oasis, like his shares, etc.
A lot of money,
which will basically
and a lot of ownership.
It was like 50 billion.
Yeah.
Which is honestly kind of conservative considered for a man who rules the world. Because consider how much
how much influence Oasis has on the entire world.
And I'm sure Steve Jobs wasn't worth more than 50 billion. I could be wrong. Or Bill Gates.
I mean, like I say, if you're trying to compare it to modern day, you gotta probably maximize it times 100 compared to what he'll probably own. A Holiday in this case.
Yeah. But going beyond, so the whole thing is that all the online people are trying to find this Easter egg, and with it they can essentially control the Oasis, and he who controls the Oasis pretty much controls the world.
Right.
Like, it sounds kind of silly, but it's true. And so, of course, there's an evil company, like, the second biggest tech company in the world, because the biggest is the one that makes the Oasis, who would love to take a hold of it. Well, I'm blinking on their name now, too.
Oh, IOI. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, because it's essentially 101.
Yeah, I couldn't even remember what they stood for. I just know it's IOI.
Innovative Online Industries.
Ah, there you go.
So, yeah.
So that's so bland sounding, too. It's
the whole point, because they are essentially the Brand X villains, which is the whole, because, like, a lot of their, like, they're just numbers, they're not
they're not people. They have no souls. They're just people in suits.
Oh yeah, and it's even worse because they're also they're essentially they run what are essentially debt prisons.
Yeah.
Which is which is for those who aren't familiar, debt prisons are like basically financial slavery.
And not only are you suffering in your digital life in the Oasis, but you also suffer in real life because you're pretty much a prisoner who's getting electrocuted if you don't do your work.
Yep. Yeah, it's like you're too poor, go to jail. Yeah. Which is just effed up. Yeah. and of course, I love the corporate villain. He's like, if we took control of the Oasis, we could probably control about 80% of the visual medium and still not risk seizures.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, good. They don't want to cause seizures.
Yeah.
But they do want to.
They want to make money, but thankfully they're not trying to cause seizures.
Yeah.
They have some kind of heart.
Yeah. I should mention the villain, by the way, is played by Ben Mendelsohn, who was also the villain in Rogue One, among other things.
Yeah. He works. And he's perfect for this.
He's easily become one of my favorite British villains right now.
He's perfect for this.
It's like much like how what's his nuts? Jeffrey Dean Morgan has just become like the perfect American villain. Like Ben Mendelsohn is the perfect British villain.
There you go. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That definitely correlates perfectly.
Yeah. So like I said, we got Wade / Parzival, and he meets up with a bunch of people, and they try to find the eggs. And along the way, they encounter a lot of pop culture because major gimmick of the book and the movie, as a result, is that essentially all of pop culture is represented.
Right. Hey, it's the internet.
Yep. It's like the obvious comparisons would be Who Framed Roger Rabbit for one, like just because that had of course famous cartoons all over the place.
Exactly.
You could argue that's kind of like Toy Story if more of the toys were
Yeah, they kind of alluded to it in Toy Story. Like you could pretty much figure out everything, but they didn't go full blast with it in Toy Story, like you said. Like Who Framed Roger Rabbit was really a good connection to it, and this is ridiculous.
Oh
yeah, it was ridiculous.
Within the first 15 minutes, you were hit with so many references.
Yeah. Like my favorite thing, and this is just from a childhood experience, is the fact that I don't know exactly who it was, but somebody actually had a Bigfoot monster truck.
Yeah.
And I had a Bigfoot monster truck as a kid that I could actually drive around in, so like that threw me back. Like, wow, and this is my favorite moment of the movie. And then something later happened that we'll talk about. That's not even a big spoiler, but I'll have to ask you a little bit later. What was your favorite pop culture reference in the movie? And I have one that just...
I have two.
Okay. Let's go with it now. Who cares? There's no point of waiting. What are yours?
Well, my favorite subtle one,
okay.
This is one that has been buzzed about a bit, which I do love. My favorite subtle one is the Battletoads show up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, they don't really talk about it, but Battletoads are in a couple scenes, which is pretty great. But as you can probably guess, my favorite moment is when the frickin' original RX-78 Gundam shows up.
Yeah, that was insane.
And like that whole sequence, like I was worried this film wasn't going to end up being that memorable because it is a lot of CG and everything.
Yeah.
And like the book is already so pervasive. Like I read the book when it came out.
Yeah.
And I even listened to the audio version because partially because my nephews were also interested in it, and they did that mostly on their own time, but we listened to that a bit as well. No, if nothing else, the Gundam scene alone is probably going to stick with me. And it may just be because I love Gundam,
right?
But there were some other pretty great scenes from the movie I think will still stick with me.
Yeah.
And yeah, of course, like I said, I'm a big Gundam fan, and to see it in a Speilberg movie, oh my god,
yeah. And also the Akira bike early in the movie too.
Yep.
Considering, Spielberg's criticism about the movie, the actual original Akira movie, all those years ago, incredible to me to see that connection now.
Well, this is the thing, because I want to point out, like, one of the criticisms that this movie is receiving, and I've seen this more than once, which is why I'm bringing it up, is that Warner Brothers properties are prominently featured, and that is true. Yeah. I mean, bear in mind, it's not just like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, like, where it's like, there's two major animation studios. You need Warner Brothers and you need Disney, right? Those are the big two. It's like, there's so many big studios. Of course they're going to use their own stuff when they can.
Like, and the fact that there's a major moment where everyone's favorite forearm villain from Mortal Kombat shows up, and it's like a major scene that he gets a lot of screen time when you see Goro show up.
And another reference gets piled on top of it, which was amazing. I mean, like, yeah, you could absolutely argue that it's a little annoying, especially with one of the challenges heavily revolves around one specific movie.
Yeah.
I guess we could probably give it away. Because the challenge, one of the things is each key in the book, to unlock it, you have to go through a series of challenges.
Yeah.
Like for example, the first key in the book, one of the major parts of it is you have to go through the Tomb of Horrors from Dungeons and Dragons, and then beat Asurak, the demi-lich, or I think it was a demi-lich from the Tomb of Horrors, in a game of Joust.
Wow.
If I'm remembering that correctly, and I think there's more on top of that, and like, there's another one where you go through like 5 pop culture references in a row. Like, there was no way they were going to adapt that.
Yeah, there's no way they could do all that in one movie.
Because it's too rapid fire. It's like there's a whole sequence from where I think you have to play as the Black Knight or fight the Black Knight from the Monty Python Holy Grail.
Yeah, I know that got cut out. I watched some videos that said a lot of stuff that was cut out completely. So
yeah, of course there's references, and of course there was a big thing about I don't think it was Tom Sawyer from Rush, but it was something else from Rush. Like, there's music references, there's all these references, and it just goes on and on. And it's like, dear God, there's no way they're going to... So I thought they kind of did a clever thing where they took the premise of the 3-key hunt, but only 2 of them, or only one of them was probably really true to the book. The other 2 were very different. Like, the first 2 specifically. Like, the final one's probably the most true to the book.
Okay.
You haven't read the book,
No, I have not, no.
Yeah. Like, that's probably the easiest way to explain it, because I don't think there's a race in the book. And the first challenge is a race.
Yeah,
and the second one...
hate to I don't want to spoil anything, but like that's one of the ones that kind of like picked at me a little bit. Was that considering how many people are playing this game, are experiencing the Oasis, and trying to achieve this challenge, like nobody figured out the solution to the first one.
I know it. Yeah, like it's a little weird.
To me, that was not feasible whatsoever.
Well, the book, it was really weird, too, because essentially he walks by, he's like, this reminds me of Tomb of Horrors. And, like, it had also been, again, years, and it's like, this place where literally hundreds, because in the book, Wade's still in high school. And he goes to high school, and, like, part of the high school is essentially Tomb of Horrors, if I'm not mistaken. I could be remembering that poorly, but I believe that's what happens. Like, it's essentially, he's going to an area where a lot of people go, and,
for some reason, nobody figures it out.
Yeah, I know. It's again one of those things like, how did nobody ever figure out? Well, because, I mean, committing to a race that could potentially lose all your stuff, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
But, quite a few things in the movie are still pretty true to true to the book. Like, a big chunk of the final climax taking place on Planet Doom from Voltron, for example. They did have to replace a few things, like, for example, I mentioned the Gundam. That was actually a replacement for Macross. Because, fun fact, the Robotech Macross lawsuit from the 1980s is still a problem today.
Wow.
We could do a whole podcast on the messed up history behind Robotech and Macross, because it's still causing problems in 2018. It's like, if you ever want to see a tangled mess of anime adaptation in North America, look up that little gem. So they had to, they replaced it with the RX-78, so I'm like, I'm fine with this. And instead of Ultraman, because they went with Iron Giant.
Yeah. I heard about that one. Yeah, that was.
Which,
it's
fine.
I'm cool with it. I'm cool with it because Iron Giant, especially for Western audiences, it fits. It's a little bit more relatable, but Ultraman.
Some people are of course offended because the Iron Giant, is used to fight in the movie, and it's like, it's kind of against the spirit of the Iron Giant.
Yeah, that was another thing. It was like, okay, we're building an Iron Giant to be a weapon, which I understand it was, but if you watch the movie, you see how he becomes sentient and actually has emotions and wants to help and not hurt, and Iron Giant's like, killing things without a second thought. Yeah,
it's a whole thing. But no, in general, I thought the movie was pretty good.
Yeah.
I liked it more than Tomb Raider or Pacific Rim.
Hands down. It's funny that we mentioned this because, okay, Tomb Raider is a video game adaptation that could have easily fit here somehow, and Pacific Rim feels like something that would be from this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, like, because they make so many, like, I mean, for God's sakes, in the movie alone, like, there's a sequence where every single gun they use is a reference.
Yeah.
Like, they have the lawgivers, or the judge pistols from freaking Judge Dredd.
The railgun.
The pulse rifle from Aliens.
The railgun. When they said the railgun, I was done. That was the best part for me, just yelled out, railgun! Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, we had all kinds of crazy vehicles, and I mean...
We had the DeLorean, we had the old school Batmobile that Adam West had, like I said, of course, the Bigfoot. But for me, like, my favorite reference that came out of nowhere was Projectile Chucky.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the one time someone curses in the movie.
Yeah, they did a very good job of keeping it PG until that moment when they throw Chucky out and onto the battlefield. And I love the fact because they're showing both. That's one great thing about the movie. They show that the reaction both in real life and actually in Oasis when a person is fighting or gets hurt or something, and Chucky just obliterates people. And this one, he just runs through so many people. And you see it in real life, like just flashes of red. Oh, that person just died. That person just died. That person just died. It was all because of Chucky.
I'm just going to quickly check and see if Child's Play is owned by Warner Brothers, because I'm curious about that. Child's Play, who is it owned by? Doesn't say. Let's see what the original movie's owned by. That's MGM. I don't think MGM is... Warner Brothers didn't get MGM. Sony did, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah.
But, I mean, like I said, it was like... Because, I mean...
They had Spawn in it, too, so...
Oh, yeah. Spawn showed up. Batman, of course. Oh, man. The 1960s Batman Batmobile. That was pretty great.
Yeah, that was absolutely phenomenal.
Oh, but I did want to comment on one more pop culture reference before we just get back to the movie itself. So, small spoiler here. They do reference The Shining quite a bit.
Oh, my goodness. Quite a bit, man. We recreated that.
Yeah. And, yes, it's a Warner Brothers property. I do want to also point out, Spielberg and Stanley Kubrick were super close.
Right.
And I mean, because Scorsese, Kubrick, Spielberg, they were all super close directors. I mean, because famously, AI was something Kubrick was working on that Spielberg ended up finishing, and of course, mixed results there. But so I really think that was an attempt to really do a tribute to Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah. And it did a shout out to him too. Yeah,
which I really think it really ties into why I felt some of the stuff that goes on with Holiday later on that really actually tugged at my heartstrings. Like, I wasn't about to cry, but I was really feeling the emotion.
Yeah. Oh, no. They really did a great job of emphasizing his character throughout the movie and his struggles, both personally and professionally. I thought they did a great job. I mean, it wasn't like he had that much screen time. They did a great job of each time they had him on screen.
I know. Like, I would have liked a little bit more fleshing out, especially with what happens with his... with Ogden, because now we're going to get into, I want to get into a few things that were different that you may not know about. So, first of all, probably most prominently is a character who dies in the book, does not die in the movie. Ogden, the Morrow.
Right, the period.
He has a much bigger role in the book. Because, they have this thing, of course, where it's like, well, somebody's going to fight against IOI. In the book, it's more Ogden. And, in the movie, it ends up being kind of more of a generic resistance.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the problem with this adaptation, I think. Because, in general, I think it's very faithful, and the changes they made, for the most part, work. They had to cut down on some of the character. And that, as a result, Wade, for example, is a little more bland. Artemis is a bit more bland. The supporting characters are still pretty much on point. Like I said, Ogden probably got the worst of it because he's not just much of a character anymore.
Right. Yeah, I think that's my biggest problem with the movie as an overall experience is the fact that the world of Oasis was so fun because the characters were and the avatars were so incredible looking and they had that personality just from looking at them. Whereas the people behind the avatars never felt like they had any growth. They felt like they weren't that dynamic. It just honestly, they felt like bland avatars compared to the real avatars.
Well, it's especially telling with Wade, though, because Wade, of course, is the protagonist, but he's really kind of a terrible person when the book starts.
Okay.
Like, he undergoes great change, and I'm, like, happy with, but, like, he's arguably represents some of the worst aspects of, the type of character you would imagine to be, person you would imagine him to be.
Yeah, and the movie just feels like the naive teenager that just is, ironically enough, the chosen one.
Yeah, and even then he's in this, it's like, not necessarily, he is the chosen one, it's just, he's the guy who managed to do what no one else had before. Like, it's a very mild chosen, but, like, in the book, he's a lot more arrogant, and he's a little bit more creepy with his attraction to the female lead. Like, it's a little more uncomfortable. Like, it's not... It's really not as bad as I'm probably making it out to be.
You sound so exasperated when you say that.
It's just, I've seen some of the stuff he said so much worse by people online, like similar types of things, and it's part of the problem because, like, even in the movie, it takes like 12 minutes of exposition to cover everything, and the book is even longer because it's like 4 chapters. Okay. And it gets a little tedious in the beginning because, I mean, it's unavoidable considering how much world you have to build so quick.
That's a lot you got to lay down.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I'm not saying it's like, he could have avoided this. I'm like, I don't know what he could have done
to avoid it.
Yeah, but like, yeah, it's one of those things. Like, you got rid of some of the more problematic aspects of the character, the less sympathetic parts of it. But as a result, he's kind of bland.
He's just a generic guy.
Yeah. Which is kind of a bummer, and like I said, it's because we had some great actors in here. I thought everyone did at least... I loved Olivia Cook.
Oh, yeah, Olivia Cook was awesome. She was awesome in everything, but she was awesome really here. And, I thought, she really stood out, considering that, to me, her character wasn't that much... She wasn't given that much either, but she did a really good job.
But she really had, like... Felt like she had personality, and her chemistry with Wade was actually pretty solid.
Yeah, I hate to spoil anything, but it just felt odd considering the connection,
Yeah, it's funny too because of course they were prettied up a bit. Her character less so because she still retained the birthmark thing on her face, which is in there. It didn't look as bad, and I would say
barely noticed it, honestly.
Yeah, I know, but and likewise Wade is. He's still kind of average looking, but he's still got a very clean complexion and stuff. Yeah. Like but he's of course a little more flexible because they needed him to do some physical stuff. But he still looked kind of maybe above average weight.
Yeah. I mean,
but he wasn't like cut.
Yeah, but it was funny because like considering his home life, he looked a lot better than he should.
He really did, but it's because he needed to be able to like crawl through the spaces and do the running scene. But like at the same time, they didn't give him like a sexy shirt off scene, which I did appreciate. Because I mean, a worse director totally would have done that. Yeah, they would have
definitely done that. It was a couple of moments where they actually had the opportunity to do it if they wanted to, and they just kept it level.
Always appreciate that, and I just wanted to wrap up by saying, Alan Silvestri, oh my god, I love his music. I'm so glad he's going to be doing Avengers: Infinity War as well.
Oh, he is.
Yeah. Wow. And because I loved the callbacks he did in this one, especially because I mean he did Back to the Future, and he did some callbacks to Back to the Future.
I mean, like I said, the obvious DeLorean for one, but I mean there were so little moments, especially for a musical taste. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like I love the music in this movie.
It's a great soundtrack. It really is.
Yeah, and of course the clever use of Jump. Like there's a lot of great musical references. It's just like I said, like it's probably not going to stand out as one of Spielberg's all-time greats or a big return to form, but considering how he's mostly done smaller Oscar bait heavy movies, which I still think are good because I loved Lincoln. I quite enjoyed The Post. I loved Bridge of Spies, but it's nice to see him do the Spielberg whimsy and do a really good job. It doesn't feel like he's Spielberg. Yeah, like it's just it was was enjoyable. I didn't really ever feel bored. I did kind of feel the length because it is almost 2.5 hours.
Yeah. I think that between that second and third act, it gets a little long-winded.
But yeah, especially because they're starting to really pound the message at that point.
Right. But I understand exactly why. Like I said, that's the thing. Like, I'm not upset that it was. It just felt a little long-winded. But then we get to that climax in the third act, and you just end it. It doesn't matter anymore. You never feel bored after that.
No, it's one of those things. It's like the movie's not the most subtle film either, but you know what? It's a great romp. It's fun for the whole family. Yeah. There's a lot of great pop culture references. And it's
definitely made for our generation. It really is.
It totally is. Like, and I don't think it's going to age as badly as some other films in the similar genre have. So, any more final thoughts on Ready Player One?
Just watch out for Chucky.
Yeah.
We learned it back in the 80s, and then we definitely learned it in 2018. Just watch out for Chucky.
Especially when he's in your back seat and you're in the driver's seat. Just rewatch the original Child's Play. The scene where the frickin' detective is trying to get away from his back seat by driving is possibly one of the most hilarious in concept and execution moments in film.
Yes.
He drives faster while someone's trying to stab him from the back seat.
Oh, good times. Good times. Like I said, really good movie. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, it might not make my top 5 by the end of the year, but it has a chance.
Yeah, like I said, it's not going to be a top Spielberg. It's not going to be probably not be a top of the year. But
from a pure fun standpoint, it's right there with it.
And it's still, and like I said, it's probably not going to be as forgettable as Pacific Rim or I barely remember Tomb Raider now.
Not a bit. I just remember the freaking ending. Now that was just sequel bait. Like that's all I remember from the movie.
Yeah, like no, I'm still replaying like the Gundam scene. I'm still replaying some of the other scenes in my head. I think I'll retain a decent amount of that movie.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll retain as much as I would from, some of the other big ones. But hey, it's something.
Yeah, very much. It could have been a big flop, but no. With those a faithful ode to really, like I said, to our generation and potentially the future too, because we're going to be living in a big pile of junk while we're running around in vans playing virtual reality.
In a van down by the river. And on that pop culture reference, I'm going to bid you all a good day.